Tom had always felt the walls of the colony pressing in on him, even when he walked through the wide corridors or looked out through the thick, curved windows at the red planet below. The colony was enormous, built like a city under a glass dome, floating above a barren world. Every corner was clean, every rule enforced, every day planned. From the moment he woke up to the moment the lights dimmed for sleep, his life felt like it was already written. He ate when he was told, worked when he was told, rested when he was told. There was no room for choice, no space for adventure, and no silence that belonged to him alone. Tom liked the colony in many ways. It was safe, efficient, and strong. The engineers had built it perfectly, the administrators ran it smoothly, and the rules kept chaos away. But Tom was not like most people here. He felt a hunger, a small, stubborn flame inside him that could not be satisfied by routine or order. He wanted to see the world beyond, even though the colony told everyone that there was nothing but emptiness outside the dome. He spent hours watching the stars at night. From his small apartment, he could see the blackness stretching far beyond the colony's lights. Occasionally, the glow of other distant stations flickered on the horizon, tiny and lifeless, yet hints of something alive and moving. He imagined flying past them, past the station's rigid lights, and finding something no one had ever seen. He imagined the wind, or what might feel like wind on another world, and sunlight that was not filtered through glass. Tom imagined freedom. The idea of leaving terrified him. Everyone said it was impossible. The vacuum will kill you in seconds, his friend Emily had warned one evening, her voice trembling. Even if you survive, there's no air, no food, no water. You'll die. Her words made sense. They were supposed to. Survival outside the colony was not just hard, it was nearly impossible. People who tried never returned. Stories of escape attempts were whispered like ghost tales. No one really knew what happened, but everyone agreed. Leaving was foolish. Yet the more Tom listened, the more the walls seemed to close in. The lights that were supposed to comfort him began to feel like bars, the air filters like invisible chains, and the orderly routines like iron cuffs around his mind. The warnings of friends and elders did not scare him away, instead they fed his resolve. He knew that fear could be managed, planned for, or even ignored if the will was strong enough. Tom started making small preparations in secret. He studied maps of the colony and the skies beyond. He learned the timing of supply ships, when the exterior doors opened, and how to move through less watched corridors. He found an old storage room long forgotten, and discovered a small escape pod, dusty and covered with metal sheets. It was old, the kind no one trusted, but it could hold a single person and keep them alive long enough to leave orbit. Tom spent nights cleaning it, checking the controls, and running mental simulations of the launch. He imagined the pod shaking violently, rising above the colony, and then gliding silently into the vast dark. At first he told no one. He did not even tell Emily. He could see the worry in her eyes every time he left the apartment late at night. She would ask, "Where are you going, Tom?" And he would smile, pretending he was just taking a walk, stretching his legs, or checking on some colony machinery. Each small lie weighed on him, but he convinced himself it was for survival. She could not help him, and he could not risk anyone stopping him. The days grew longer, and the colony's artificial sun never changed. Tom spent more time looking at the stars, imagining the spaces between, feeling the call of the unknown. He thought about what might wait beyond the walls. He pictured mountains taller than any dome, rivers that moved freely, forests that could grow without being pruned by machines. He imagined creatures that had never seen humans, skies painted in colors the colony could not reproduce, and silence that was deep, soft, and infinite. It all seemed impossible, yet in his mind it was real. It pulled at him like a magnet, and he felt a sharp ache when he returned to the artificial order of daily life. Tom began to plan carefully. Every detail mattered. He made lists of what he would need: food rations, water, oxygen tanks, a spacesuit that would keep him alive in the vacuum, and tools to repair the pod if anything broke. He memorized emergency procedures, imagined every step of the launch, and rehearsed actions until they felt automatic. He calculated timings, estimated risks, and prepared for every problem he could think of. Even then, he knew he could not plan for everything. The unknown was vast, unpredictable, and terrifying. But he also knew that no plan could match courage, and courage was something humans had in abundance. One evening, after weeks of preparation, he sat on the observation deck, looking at the stars. The colony's lights flickered behind him, soft and warm, yet confining. He thought about Emily and the others. He thought about the warnings, the rules, and the stories of those who had disappeared. He thought about the safety of routine and the comfort of knowing what would happen next. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. "I have to do this," he whispered to himself. "I have to see what is out there." The words felt heavy but also right. He could almost feel the pull of space in his chest, a quiet urging that made his pulse quicken. The unknown was not cruel, it was calling him. He wanted to answer. He wanted to feel the risk, to feel alive, to touch something real beyond the walls that had kept him safe but trapped him like a bird in a cage. That night he moved quickly and quietly. He unlocked the storage room, checked the pod one last time and packed the final supplies. His hands shook with a mix of fear and excitement. Every sound in the corridor made him jump. He knew that if anyone discovered him, they would stop him. He knew that if anything went wrong, the cold dark of space could end him instantly. But still he felt a thrill unlike anything he had known. The possibility of life, the possibility of discovery, made everything worth the risk. Tom climbed into the pod and strapped himself into the seat. The controls were cold under his fingers, the screens flickering to life. He took a deep breath, listening to the faint hum of the colony behind him. It was a sound he had known all his life, but it felt distant now, almost unreal. He looked at the stars outside the thick window, stretching into endless blackness, and smiled. He was ready. He pressed the final button, activating the launch sequence. The pod vibrated, lights blinking, alarms beeping softly. In that moment, Tom felt a surge of pride and fear, of hope and uncertainty. He thought of the colony, of Emily, of every rule he had ever followed. And then, with a quiet, determined push, the pod lifted from its cradle, breaking free from the walls that had held him for so long. Tom was leaving everything he knew. He was going into the unknown. And somehow, that felt exactly like being alive. The pod shook as it left the colony's orbit. Tom held tightly to the controls, feeling every vibration as if it were a heartbeat. The blackness of space stretched endlessly around him, a quiet void so vast it made him feel both insignificant and alive. He had expected fear to grip him, but instead, there was a strange sense of peace. For the first time he was truly free. The colony, with its walls, lights and rules, was behind him. Ahead lay the unknown. He stared at the stars. They were bright and cold, scattered like diamonds across the endless darkness. He had seen them before through the thick glass of the colony windows, but now they were close and real. Each one seemed to whisper secrets he could not yet understand. Tom imagined what it would be like to touch them, to sail past them, to feel the wind of space, even though he knew there was none. Every thought made his pulse quicken. He realized that life outside was nothing like the ordered, predictable life inside the colony. Here, every second was a choice, every decision a test. The first day passed quietly. Tom checked his instruments repeatedly, making sure the pod systems were stable. Oxygen levels were good, food and water supplies were intact, and the pod's engine hummed steadily. He had prepared meticulously, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the vast emptiness surrounding him. There were no landmarks, no familiar sounds, no hints of life. Just him, the pod and the stars. On the second day he faced the first real challenge. A small meteor shower passed near his path, tiny rocks moving at incredible speed. The pod's shields were designed for minor collisions, but Tom still felt a spike of fear. He adjusted the pod's trajectory carefully, heart hammering in his chest. The meteors flashed past, bright streaks against the dark, and then they were gone. Tom exhaled slowly, feeling a rush of triumph. He had survived his first danger in the wild of space. A small smile appeared on his face. Being human, he realized, meant facing fear and moving forward anyway. Days turned into a rhythm. Tom ate when he needed energy, slept in short bursts, and watched the stars as he drifted deeper into the unknown. He kept a journal not just to record coordinates but to capture thoughts and feelings. Writing made him feel grounded, reminded him that he was alive and thinking, not just floating in emptiness. He wrote about the strange beauty of the stars, the silence that was so deep it felt like a living presence, and the strange joy of moving through a universe that no human had fully seen. Tom began to notice patterns in the darkness. Occasionally he would see tiny glimmers far off, the faint lights of distant stations or satellites. He had no way of knowing who, or what, had built them, but the discovery thrilled him. There were others out there, and he was part of a larger universe. It made him feel small, yes, but also important in a way the colony had never allowed. The colony had made life safe but predictable. Out here, every moment carried possibility. One night, Tom saw something he did not understand. A soft green glow appeared on the horizon, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. He adjusted the pod sensors, but the instruments showed nothing unusual. No planets, no ships, no objects in the path. The glow remained, mysterious and inviting. Tom felt a shiver of excitement mixed with fear. He had no idea what it was, but he knew he had to see. Being human, he realized, was not just surviving, it was daring to go toward the unknown, even when it was strange or frightening. The following days were difficult. The pod moved steadily, but he faced moments of exhaustion. Sleeping in space was never easy. The hum of the engines and the subtle movement of the pod made rest light and shallow. Hunger came as a sharp reminder of life, and thirst gnawed at him despite careful rationing. Each challenge, though small, made him aware of his own strength. He had survived the colony's rigid life, but surviving the universe required something more: creativity, adaptability, and courage. He began to experiment. Tom tested the pod sensors in different directions, adjusted the shields, and practiced navigating without relying entirely on instruments. He learned to read the stars as if they were a map, noting subtle changes in light and position. It was tiring, sometimes frustrating, but the sense of mastery was exhilarating. Every small success, like moving the pod closer to the green glow or avoiding a collision, became a victory. He felt more human than ever before, alive in a way the colony had never allowed. One morning, Tom saw something moving far off, a shadow against the stars, large and slow, like a massive shape gliding through the darkness. He had no way to know its size or intent, but the sight filled him with awe. It moved gracefully, silently, and seemed to acknowledge his presence. 4 hours he watched, heart racing, realizing that life beyond the colony might not be empty. There could be other beings, other creatures, perhaps intelligent, watching the universe just as he was. And for the first time he did not feel fear. He felt wonder. The journey stretched on. Days blended into nights, though there was no sun to mark them. He learned to enjoy small routines, checking supplies, adjusting course, journaling, resting. The rhythm of space travel became familiar, a strange comfort in the infinite darkness. And yet, every glance out the pod's small window reminded him that this was just the beginning. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of possibility. He had left the colony, but he was far from arriving anywhere. By the end of the week, Tom felt a deep connection to the vastness around him. Space was not hostile, he realized, it was neutral. It did not seek to harm him or protect him. It simply was. And in that neutrality he found freedom. Being human, he thought, meant having the courage to step into this neutrality, to create meaning, to act, to explore. The stars were silent, but they spoke in their own way, teaching patience, awe, and respect. Tom's thoughts often returned to the colony. He wondered if anyone was looking for him, if Emily worried, or if the administrators knew he was gone. A part of him missed the warmth of companionship, the small comforts of routine, but another part rejoiced in the solitude. He could make choices now that were truly his own. Every movement of the pod, every decision to explore a new direction, reminded him of that fact. He was human, and that meant he could act, think, and dream beyond the limits others imposed. One evening, as the pod drifted near a cluster of distant, glowing lights, Tom felt a surge of excitement. He had no map, no guide, no clear destination, yet he felt he was moving toward something remarkable. The journey itself had become his teacher, and he realized that the act of exploring, of daring to leave the known behind, was its own reward. Being human meant curiosity, courage, and the relentless drive to find what was beyond reach. He had left the colony and discovered the universe, and in doing so he discovered himself. And so, day after day, Tom continued. He floated through the black, silent space, a small pod carrying a single human heart full of wonder. He faced dangers he could not yet see, challenges he could not yet imagine, and discoveries that would change him forever. He was alone but not lonely. He was small but not powerless. He was human, and that was enough. By the end of the week, Tom stood on a high hill overlooking a valley filled with rivers and forests. He could see movement everywhere, creatures flying, swimming, crawling, plants shifting, water flowing, clouds drifting. The planet was alive in a way the colony could never be. He understood that humans had survived for so long inside metal walls, but life outside was wild, free, and unpredictable. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. He had left the colony and discovered a world of endless possibilities. Tom knew this was just the beginning. There were more places to explore, more mysteries to uncover, and more lessons to learn. He was alone, yes, but he was not trapped. He was human, and that meant curiosity, courage, and the will to survive and thrive in a world that had never known him. The discovery of this planet made him realize that life was bigger than safety, rules, or walls. It was about freedom, wonder, and the endless drive to discover. And as he stood there, breathing the alien air, watching creatures glide across rivers and forests, Tom felt something he had never felt inside the colony: hope. Humanity was not meant to be trapped. It was meant to explore, to survive, to learn, and to grow. And here, on this strange, vibrant planet, he understood that possibilities were limitless. Of the parts in 1100 words and only give small story, it should be interesting and write it in third-person style, and it should be in simple and basic English. Use simple and basic English. And not give headings. Tom had been traveling for what felt like weeks, the black emptiness of space stretching endlessly around him. He had no map, no real idea where he was going, and yet he trusted his instincts. Every day brought new challenges, from micrometeors brushing past the pod to sudden system alerts that made his heart race. But he had grown confident. He understood the rhythm of the pod, the way the controls responded, and the quiet language of the stars. Each night, he drifted in and out of sleep, listening to the hum of life support systems and staring at the infinite darkness outside. Then one morning the stars themselves seemed to change. He noticed a soft glow in the distance, brighter and warmer than the cold white points of light he had grown used to. The glow was irregular, shimmering with colors he could not name. His heart quickened. He adjusted the pod's course, moving closer, careful not to rush. As he approached, the glow resolved into a shape, round and solid, yet alive with motion. He blinked, leaning closer to the window. It was a planet, but nothing like he had expected. The surface was a riot of colors. There were greens deeper than any forests on Earth, blues that shimmered like jewels, and reds and yellows twisting together in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Rivers cut across the land in intricate designs, reflecting sunlight in ways that made the water sparkle. Clouds floated lazily in the sky, some tinged with colors that Tom had never imagined. Mountains rose in strange shapes, jagged and smooth at the same time, while valleys seemed to glow from within. It was a world that breathed, that lived, and it was completely unspoiled. Tom felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had left the colony expecting emptiness, danger, perhaps nothing at all. Instead, he had found a place teeming with life. Even from the pod he could see movement. Strange creatures glided in the rivers, their forms unlike any animals he had studied or imagined. Some had long, flowing shapes that shimmered in the sunlight. Others flitted in the sky, wings beating with a gentle rhythm, watching him with what seemed like curiosity. None appeared aggressive, yet all were aware of his presence. He realized that he had entered a world where life was free and unpredictable, entirely beyond the rules of the colony. The first landing attempt was nerve-wracking. Tom carefully maneuvered the pod toward a flat, open area near one of the glowing rivers. The surface shimmered slightly, reacting to the pod's shadow. He touched the controls lightly, lowering the pod slowly, and felt the vibrations as the landing gear made contact. The pod settled with a soft shudder, and for the first time, Tom stepped outside into another world. The air was thick but breathable, carrying scents he could not name. The wind, or whatever it was, caressed his face, cool and alive. He could hear the soft hum of the rivers, the rustle of plants that moved as though watching him, and distant calls from creatures high above. The colors around him seemed almost alive, shifting slightly as if responding to his presence. Every step he took made him realize that this world was vibrant, alive, and independent of human control. Here there were no rules except those of nature itself. He explored carefully, walking along the river's edge. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the sky and the strange patterns of light on the surface. Tiny creatures swam just beneath the surface, darting in synchronized motions that mesmerized him. He knelt, touching the water, feeling its coolness. Life was here in abundance, yet it was not organized or predictable. It followed no plan, no pattern that humans had imposed on their world. For the first time, Tom understood what it meant to be truly alive. As he moved further, he saw creatures on land. Some were enormous, their bodies covered in smooth, shining scales. Others were small, curious, hopping or crawling with delicate movements. None were afraid of him, yet none sought his attention either. It was as if he had entered a place where he was both observer and guest, where the rules of human civilization did not apply. Tom marveled at their diversity, their freedom, and their energy. He realized that humanity had been trapped in the colony, shielded from the vast possibilities of life, and now he could see what had been missing. The sky above was just as alive as the land below. Strange flying creatures moved in patterns that seemed chaotic at first, then revealed subtle order as he watched longer. Their wings glimmered in the sunlight, reflecting colors that matched the rivers and forests. Tom felt a thrill he had never experienced in the controlled environment of the colony. Everything about this world was raw, unpredictable, and beautiful. It made him aware of the limitations he had lived under for so long, the walls that had kept him safe but also kept him from feeling the true pulse of life. He spent hours wandering, documenting what he could with small instruments he had brought from the pod. He sketched the strange plants, noted the movement of animals and wrote descriptions of the sky and rivers. Every observation deepened his sense of wonder. He felt both small and significant. Small because the planet was vast beyond comprehension, significant because he was the first human to set foot here. He realized that the universe was full of surprises and humans with curiosity and courage could be part of them. Tom built a small shelter near the river, using materials from the pod and natural objects he found. It was simple, enough to protect him from occasional storms and provide a place to rest. For the first time in his life, he made decisions entirely for himself, without instructions or rules imposed by others. He chose where to go, what to do, and how to survive. Each choice reinforced his sense of humanity, the ability to act, to think, and to adapt in ways no artificial system could teach. At night he watched the sky. The stars were different here, the constellations unfamiliar, the light brighter without the colony's filters. He could see the movement of distant planets, the shimmer of moons and the trails of comets. Occasionally he caught glimpses of the creatures flying in the dark, their eyes glowing softly, observing him in silence. Tom realized that he was not alone, yet he was independent. Life around him was not governed by fear, rules, or hierarchy, it simply existed freely and fully. He felt a mixture of fear and joy. Fear of the unknown dangers that might exist, of predators, storms, or other challenges. Joy at the realization that he had left the artificial limits of the colony and entered a living, breathing universe. This planet was not just a place to survive, it was a place to experience life in its rawest, most unpredictable form. Humanity had been trapped in metal walls and artificial rules, but now he could see the beauty of what had been denied to him. In the following days Tom explored further. He discovered forests that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, waterfalls that sparkled in strange colors, and valleys filled with plants that swayed even without wind. The creatures continued to watch him, some approaching cautiously, others retreating to safety. He learned to move slowly, to respect the rhythms of the planet, and to appreciate the balance of life around him. Every step was a lesson, every encounter a reminder that he was part of something much greater than the colony. The planet was beautiful, but it was not easy. From the moment Tom left his pod to explore the forests and rivers, he realized that survival would not come without effort. The first challenge appeared quickly. Food was scarce, at least food he recognized. Plants were strange, some glowing faintly, some moving when touched, and he had no way of knowing which were safe to eat. He tried tasting a few carefully, but even the smallest mistake caused stomach pain. He learned quickly that hunger would be a constant teacher, and he had to adapt or fail. Water was easier to find, flowing in clear rivers and streams, but it was cold and swift. Drinking directly from the rivers made him shiver, and he had to find safe spots where the water was slower, calmer. Sometimes, strange creatures would watch him from the banks, their eyes glowing faintly, curiosity in their gaze but caution in their movements. They never approached too closely, and Tom realized that he was in their world, not the other way around. Patience became his friend. He observed before acting, learning patterns of life around him. Storms were another test. The planet was unpredictable. Sudden clouds formed overhead, dark and heavy, sending torrents of rain and gusts of wind that twisted the strange plants and made the rivers roar. Lightning struck in colors he had never seen before, splitting the sky with purple and green flashes. The pod could not withstand such storms outside, so he built simple shelters using branches, vines and materials he had brought from the pod. Each shelter was crude, yet it protected him. He learned to read the sky, to understand the subtle changes in clouds and wind, and to move quickly when danger approached. The storms tested his patience and resilience, but he discovered that he could endure. The creatures of the planet were not all friendly. Some were large and intimidating, moving in ways that made his heart race. A massive creature with long, glimmering scales came near his shelter one day, its eyes observing him as if measuring whether he was a threat. Tom froze at first, unsure what to do. Then he remembered the lessons of the colony. Humans had the ability to think, to reason, to act with care. Slowly he backed away, speaking softly, showing no sudden movements. The creature watched him for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Tom realized that understanding and patience could prevent conflict, that humans had a strength beyond physical power. Over time he began to learn the creature's ways. He noticed patterns in their behavior. Small groups moved together, some came to the rivers to drink at certain times, Others rested in forests during the brightest part of the day. By studying them he learned to coexist. He moved quietly through the forests, making no sudden noises. He approached only when necessary and retreated when signs of danger appeared. Slowly he earned a cautious trust from some of the smaller, timid creatures. A small, bird-like creature with shimmering wings began to follow him from a distance, watching his actions, learning to trust him. Tom named it Luma in his mind and felt a small spark of companionship. Every day was a challenge. He had to find food and water, protect himself from storms, and navigate the strange forests where every shadow could hide danger. Sometimes the weight of the task made him question whether he could survive. But each time he overcame an obstacle, he felt a surge of pride. Humans were adaptable. They could learn, adjust, and endure. The colony had tried to keep him safe, to control him, but it had never taught him what he was capable of when left to his own devices. Here, in a wild world, he discovered that strength was not just physical. It was in the mind, the heart, and the will to continue even when the path was uncertain. One evening, after a particularly strong storm, Tom found a clearing where small creatures had gathered. Tiny, timid beings, no bigger than a rabbit, with translucent bodies and eyes that glowed faintly, cautiously approached him. He stayed still, holding out a small piece of food he had prepared. They hesitated at first, then one crept forward, taking it gently. Soon the others followed. Tom felt a warmth in his chest. He had formed a bond, however small, in a world where life had no obligation to trust him. It was a lesson in patience, empathy, and perseverance. Being human meant he could build relationships, even with creatures that were completely different from him. The days and nights blurred together as Tom adapted further. He learned which plants were safe to eat, how to follow the rivers for fresh water, and which areas of the forest were safest during storms. He constructed a small network of shelters in different spots, each offering protection depending on the weather or the movement of the creatures. He began to track patterns, writing in his journal, noting the behavior of animals, the direction of storms, and the growth of plants. Each observation made him stronger, smarter, more connected to the planet. There were moments of fear, of course. A sudden predator appeared once, its long shadow falling across his shelter as he slept. Tom's heart raced, but he remained calm, remembering what he had learned. He stayed still, waited, and when the creature passed without attacking, he realized that fear could be controlled. Fear was a tool, not a master. It guided him, kept him alert, but it did not dominate him. Every challenge he survived strengthened him further, reminding him that humans were capable of enduring even in worlds completely unlike the ones they knew. Tom also began experimenting. He tried fishing in the strange rivers, using natural tools to catch small creatures that could provide food. Some attempts failed, but he learned from each mistake. He discovered ways to purify water, how to collect rain safely during storms, and even how to protect himself from minor injuries using plants with healing properties. Each success reinforced the truth that humans could adapt. Survival was not guaranteed, but intelligence, patience, and courage made it possible. Through all this, Luma and other small creatures stayed nearby. They became companions in a silent, mutual understanding. Tom spoke to them softly, naming them, learning their habits, and feeling a connection to life that was deeper than anything he had known in the colony. The creatures reminded him that life was not just about survival, it was about trust, observation, and coexistence. He had left a place of control to find unpredictability, and in return, he gained a sense of belonging that was more rewarding than any safety the colony had offered. One night, Tom climbed a hill overlooking the forest and rivers. The sun, or the planet's version of sunlight, was low on the horizon, painting the land in shades of gold and pink. He watched creatures moving, rivers flowing, and plants swaying gently in the breeze. The planet was alive in every sense, and he had learned to move with it rather than against it. He realized that humans had a special strength, the ability to think, feel, and survive even in worlds that were completely alien. Every decision, every observation, every careful step was proof of that strength. As the days passed, he began to feel a deep sense of accomplishment. He had arrived as a stranger, uncertain and fragile. Now he was part of the planet's rhythm, a small but active participant in the web of life. The challenges had tested him, pushed him to limits he had never imagined, but they had also revealed what it meant to be human: the courage to act, the wisdom to observe, the patience to learn, and the empathy to connect. Tom knew there would be more challenges. The planet was vast, its creatures unpredictable, and storms could strike without warning. But he was ready. He had learned to adapt, to think, and to trust his instincts. Each day strengthened his mind and spirit, and he began to see the possibilities that awaited him beyond mere survival. Humanity could thrive here not because the planet made it easy, but because humans were capable of rising to any challenge. And as Tom rested near the river, watching Luma and the other creatures move through the forest, he smiled. He was no longer just a boy from a colony orbiting a red planet. He was a human in a wild world, learning, adapting, and discovering the true strength that lay within him. The planet had tested him, but it had also given him life, lessons, and companions. And in that, he understood that the essence of humanity was not safety or order. It was courage, adaptability, and the willingness to face the unknown with hope. Tom looked out over the strange, colorful landscape, the rivers winding like silver threads and the forests glowing softly under the alien sun. The planet was alive in ways he had never imagined. He had survived storms, learned to coexist with the creatures, and discovered food and water sources that sustained him. Every day had been a challenge, but each challenge had taught him something new about the world and, more importantly, about himself. He realized that humans had a strength that went far beyond the rules and walls of the colony, the power to adapt, to observe, and to keep moving forward even when the path was uncertain. He felt a sense of satisfaction but also a growing responsibility. This was not just a place for him, it was a world that could teach others, inspire them, and expand the understanding of life beyond the colony. He thought about the people back home, trapped in the controlled, predictable life of the orbital city. They believed there was nothing outside, only emptiness, only danger. Tom knew now that they were wrong. There was a world full of life, beauty, and possibilities, waiting for humans brave enough to see it. Tom opened the communication panel in his pod. It had been modified to reach the colony, sending signals through space that could pierce the walls of isolation. He did not need anyone to rescue him. He did not need approval, praise, or permission. He simply wanted to share what he had found. He typed a short message, simple and clear, describing the planet, the rivers, the forests, and the creatures he had encountered. He sent pictures, sketches, and recordings from his instruments, documenting everything. It was a gift of truth, a glimpse of life beyond the walls, and a message that humanity could be more than it had been taught to imagine. Back in the colony, reactions varied. Some administrators dismissed the signal as a malfunction or a fabrication. Some scientists studied the data carefully, intrigued but skeptical. Some citizens whispered excitedly among themselves, imagining a world full of life and freedom beyond the strict rules and schedules they had known all their lives. Tom did not wait for their decisions. He knew that truth did not require validation from those unwilling to see it. He had discovered the universe, and that was enough. He turned his attention back to the planet. The land stretched endlessly before him, rich with color, movement, and life. He had mapped rivers, forests, and plains. He had observed creatures both large and small, learned which plants were safe to eat, and even built a small network of shelters for his safety. He realized that survival alone was not enough. To truly belong, he needed to engage with the planet, to understand its rhythms, and to act with care. Humanity could flourish here, he thought, not because the world made it easy, but because humans had the ability to learn, adapt, and create meaning wherever they were. Tom prepared a small flag, simple but symbolic. He had carried it with him in his pod, wrapped carefully, and now he held it in his hands, feeling the fabric ripple in the soft breeze. He thought about the colony, about the people he had left behind, and about the future. Planting this flag was not a claim of ownership. It was a promise, a signal that humans could reach beyond their artificial walls, that they could survive, explore, and thrive in places that had once seemed impossible. He planted the flag on a small hill overlooking a river that sparkled in the sunlight. The ground beneath him was firm, the air alive with scents and sounds of the alien world. He stepped back and looked at it, smiling at the sky. In that moment he felt a deep connection to the planet, to the universe, and to the part of humanity that had always sought freedom, knowledge, and discovery. He was not just a boy from a space colony. He was a human standing on a new world, a representative of the species' courage, curiosity, and persistence. The creatures around him approached cautiously. Luma, the small bird-like being that had followed him through forests and rivers, perched nearby, watching the flag flutter. Other small animals moved closer, curious but calm. Tom realized that his presence had been accepted, that his patience, respect, and care had allowed him to exist in harmony with the planet. Life was not conquered here, it was observed, understood, and honored. This was a lesson he could carry back to the colony if anyone was willing to listen. Tom explored further, marking new areas, cataloging unusual plants, and observing behaviors he had never seen before. Every day brought discoveries, glowing flowers that opened at night, rivers that shifted slightly in pattern each day, creatures with intelligence and instincts unlike anything back home. He realized that humans had been sheltered in the colony, taught to follow rules rather than create their own. Here there were no rules except those of life itself. To survive, to thrive, to belong, he had to think, adapt, and act with care. It was challenging but also exhilarating. He spent time resting on the hill, looking up at the stars above. The sky was clearer here than from the colony, the constellations unfamiliar, the light pure. He imagined other planets, other civilizations, other forms of life, all waiting to be discovered. The universe was vast, limitless, and full of possibilities. Humanity was only at the beginning of understanding it, but Tom had taken the first step. He had shown that a single human with courage and curiosity could reach beyond the walls and find life, beauty, and meaning. He sent another signal to the colony, this time including more detailed observations. The air was breathable, water was fresh, and the planet had stable zones for living. He described the creatures he had learned to coexist with, the patterns of the rivers and forests, and the shelter he had built. Some people doubted him, but others were inspired. The idea of leaving the colony, once unthinkable, began to seem possible. He was not asking anyone to come. He was simply showing that there was more to life than the metal walls, controlled schedules, and predictable routines of their artificial home. Tom understood something important. The journey itself was as valuable as the discovery. Leaving the colony had been dangerous, exhausting, and frightening. Yet it had taught him patience, courage, and resilience. The planet, with all its challenges, had tested him, and he had adapted. He had formed connections with creatures, understood the rhythms of a world completely unlike his own, and discovered that being human meant more than following instructions. It meant learning, exploring, and daring to dream. As days passed, he explored farther, mapping rivers, valleys, and forests. He marked safe zones, observed unusual phenomena, and continued to build small shelters that could withstand storms. Every effort strengthened him, deepened his understanding of the planet, and reminded him that humans had the ability to survive and thrive anywhere. The colony had tried to keep them safe, but safety alone was not enough. Life required courage, creativity, and the willingness to face the unknown. At sunset, Tom stood on a ridge overlooking a vast valley. The river below reflected the glowing colors of the sky, creatures moved freely, and plants swayed gently in the breeze. He felt a sense of completeness, a connection to the planet, to the universe, and to the human spirit. Planting the flag, sending the signals, exploring the land, each act was proof that humans were capable of more than they had ever believed. They could flourish anywhere, not just inside walls or under rules. He looked at Luma perched nearby and other small creatures moving cautiously closer. He realized that life had accepted him here, that he had earned a place in the rhythm of this world. Humanity's journey was only beginning, but he had taken the first step. He smiled at the sky, imagining the stars as friends rather than distant points of light. The universe was vast, but he was ready. He had discovered a new world, learned its lessons, and proven that humans could survive and thrive wherever they went. Tom knew there would be more challenges, more discoveries, and more unknown worlds waiting. But he no longer feared them. He had learned that humans carried strength within themselves, the ability to think, to feel, to act, and to adapt. The universe was no longer a distant mystery. It was a place for exploration, for learning, and for life. Humanity had taken its first step beyond the colony, and he had led the way. And so, standing on the alien soil with the flag planted and the creatures around him, Tom felt hope, pride, and a sense of purpose. He had left the walls that confined him, faced the unknown, and discovered life in its raw, untamed beauty. The universe waited for humanity, full of wonders, dangers, and possibilities. And he was ready. He was human, and that alone made him strong, curious, and capable of discovering what lay beyond.